Chapter 1. The groom raised his champagne glass before the wedding cake was cut and announced that his mother would receive the bride's inheritance, the new house, and $6,000 every month. For 3 seconds, the ballroom stayed beautiful. White roses climbed the pillars. Crystal chandeliers threw warm light across 400 guests. A string quartet near the terrace kept playing because the musicians had not yet understood that the room had just turned into a trial. Then the groom smiled. "Marriage is about family," Nathaniel Vale said into the microphone, his voice smooth with practiced charm. "And in my family, my mother comes first. So tonight, I want everyone to witness my promise. My wife, Elise, has agreed that Mom will manage the property, the family accounts, and a monthly allowance of $6,000. After all, she raised the man Elise gets to marry." His mother, Patricia Vale, pressed a lace handkerchief to her mouth as if moved by sacred devotion. Her diamond earrings trembled under the lights. At the front table, she tilted her chin just enough for Elise to see the victory in her eyes. Guests began whispering before they remembered to look polite. Elise Hartwell sat in her wedding dress, one hand resting beside the untouched champagne flute. She did not cry. She did not lower her head. She did not perform the shocked bride Nathaniel clearly expected. Across the table, Nathaniel's sister Marissa mouthed, "Sorry," but did not stand. Patricia leaned toward Elise with a smile as thin as a paper cut. "Darling, do not look so pale. A good wife knows how to honor her new family." Nathaniel heard it and laughed softly into the microphone. "And Elise is a good wife. Quiet, sensible. She understands where she belongs." That was when Elise stood. The train of her ivory gown slid behind her like a wave over polished marble. She walked toward him slowly, each step quiet enough to make the silence sharper. Nathaniel's smile widened. He thought she was coming to be corrected in public, perhaps to kiss his cheek and prove obedience. Instead, Elise reached out and took the microphone from his hand. Not gently. The speakers cracked with a small burst of feedback. Nathaniel blinked. "Elise, sweetheart, this is not the time." She turned to face the guests. Her veil framed her face, but her eyes were clear, almost bright. "No," she said. "This is exactly the time." The ballroom froze. Patricia's handkerchief stopped halfway to her lips. Elise looked at her new husband, the man who had stood beside her at the altar 2 hours earlier and promised honor. "Nathaniel, you just told 400 witnesses that I agreed to give your mother my inheritance, my house, and $6,000 a month." He lowered his voice. "Do not embarrass yourself." "I am not the one who should be embarrassed." A murmur rolled through the room. Elise lifted the microphone closer. "Since we are making family finances public, let us finish the conversation you started." Nathaniel's face tightened. "Give me the mic." She smiled then. Not sweetly. Not kindly. It was the smile of a woman who had waited long enough for a man to reveal himself under bright lights. "In a moment," Elise said. "First, your mother should know the house she planned to manage is not yours. The inheritance you plan to control is not mine to sign away tonight. And the $6,000 you promised her every month was going to come from a trust your family has been lying to investors about for 2 years. The quartet stopped playing. Somewhere near the back, a glass fell and shattered. Nathaniel's smile vanished. Elise turned toward the side doors. "Mr. Calder, you can come in now." The doors opened. A silver-haired attorney entered with 2 auditors, 1 court officer, and a woman in a navy suit carrying a sealed folder. Patricia stood so fast her chair struck the table behind her. Elise looked at Nathaniel and spoke into the microphone one last time before the room erupted. "You wanted witnesses, Nathaniel. Congratulations. You have them." Nathaniel Vale had proposed to Elise in a private garden behind a museum, beneath a sculpture he did not understand but knew was expensive. He had rehearsed the moment perfectly. Dark suit. Platinum ring. Photographer hidden behind a hedge. Late afternoon light turning the fountain gold. Elise remembered thinking that he looked handsome and slightly anxious, which had softened her. "I know I can be ambitious," he said, kneeling on one knee. "I know my work consumes me, but you make me want a life that is more than winning." At the time, she believed him. That was the danger of men like Nathaniel. They did not lie all at once. They offered a true sentence beside a false promise, and the heart, wanting to be fair, often carried both. Elise had been 32, an art restoration consultant with quiet manners and a reputation for impossible patience. She wore muted colors, worked with steady hands, and listened more than she spoke. People often mistook that for softness. Nathaniel had mistaken it for usefulness. He came from the Vale family, a name old enough to impress people who liked names more than balance sheets. His late father had built Vale Meridian, a luxury hospitality investment company that bought historic hotels, restored their lobbies, cut staff, and called it modernization. Nathaniel had inherited the title of chief executive 3 years before meeting Elise. He spoke well on panels. He looked excellent in photographs. He knew how to make debt sound like vision. Elise had met him at a charity auction where she had been hired to assess a damaged Dutch landscape. Nathaniel had spent 20 minutes discussing the painting with confidence and no accuracy. When Elise gently corrected him, he had laughed at himself and said, "Then I should keep you close. You make ignorance less expensive." It was charming because it sounded humble. Later, she would learn that Nathaniel liked being corrected only when correction made him look generous. His mother, Patricia, was introduced to Elise a month later at the Vale townhouse. Patricia wore pale silk, poured tea without spilling a drop, and looked Elise over as if evaluating a used chandelier. "Hartwell," Patricia said. "Not the Newport Hartwells?" "No," Elise said. "My family is from Maine." Patricia's expression cooled by one careful degree. "How sturdy." Nathaniel squeezed Elise's hand under the table. She thought it was support. In hindsight, it was a warning to be quiet. Patricia asked about her parents, her income, her apartment, her clients, and whether art restoration provided emotional fulfillment, since it surely cannot provide stability. Elise answered with the calm of someone who had spent years removing varnish from centuries-old canvases. Delicate pressure. No sudden movements. Never let the surface crack because another person rushed you. When they left, Nathaniel kissed her temple on the sidewalk. "Mother can be intense. She dislikes me. She dislikes everyone at first. Does she improve?" He laughed. "Not really. But you will win her over." Elise had smiled because she still believed love meant entering difficult rooms and learning the exits later. The first red flag came 2 weeks after the engagement. Nathaniel asked her to join him at the bank to streamline a few household details. He wanted her to add his name to a small account she used for restoration expenses. "It will make vendors easier after the wedding," he said. Elise looked at the forms, then at him. "My restoration account has nothing to do with the wedding." He kissed her knuckles. "I know. I just do not like you carrying administrative burdens alone." "That is kind. But no." For half a second, irritation flashed in his eyes. Then he smiled and blamed himself for being overprotective. The second red flag arrived wearing Patricia's perfume. Patricia invited Elise to lunch at the Whitcomb Club and presented a handwritten list titled Marriage Order. It included holiday schedules, family seating rules, acceptable charities, clothing suggestions for public events, and a line that read, "Monthly contribution to Patricia's household, $6,000. Elise read it twice. "Is this a joke?" she asked. Patricia's eyebrows lifted. "Do I seem humorous?" "No. Then why ask?" Elise folded the list and placed it beside her plate. "I will discuss finances with Nathaniel. Nathaniel is generous to a fault. I protect him from women who confuse marriage with a promotion." The waiter arrived with salads. Patricia smiled at him as if nothing sharp had been said. Elise did not touch her fork. That evening, she told Nathaniel. He sighed, leaned against her kitchen counter, and rubbed his forehead. "She should not have shown you that." "Because it is inappropriate?" "Because it is premature." Elise stared at him. "You knew. Mother depends on me. 6,000 a month? It is not a shocking amount in our circle. It is shocking when your mother demands it from your fiancé." He stepped closer, softening his face. "Elise, sweetheart, you misunderstand. It would not be from you. It would be from us. There is no us account. There will be. Not for your mother's allowance." He laughed lightly, as if she were being adorable. "You are very principled about imaginary money." Elise said nothing. Nathaniel touched her cheek. "Do not make this ugly. Weddings are stressful. Mother is old-fashioned. Let me handle her." That phrase returned often. "Let me handle her." It sounded protective until Elise realized it meant let him manage what information reached which woman, so both remained. Quiet life contained one fact Nathaniel did not know. Hartwell was not merely a sturdy main name. It belonged to Hartwell Conservancy Trust, a private family office created by Elise's grandmother, Nora Hartwell, after she sold a shipping logistics company for a sum newspapers described as unexpected, because they had not expected a widow in rubber boots to outmaneuver three global buyers. Nora had hated attention. She bought land, funded libraries, restored theaters, and hid behind trustees whenever someone tried to photograph her. Her children inherited money and a strict rule: never confuse visibility with power. Elise had inherited both. She lived in a modest apartment because she liked the light. She restored paintings because damage that could be healed without spectacle comforted her. She used public transportation more often than cars because traffic made everyone equal. To Nathaniel, these habits proved she was ordinary. He never asked why a restoration consultant could decline high-paying clients without panic. He never asked why museum directors returned her calls immediately. He never asked why, when he complained about a delayed financing package for his company's biggest project, Elise knew the name of the lender before he mentioned it. Vale Meridian's crisis had begun before the proposal. The company had overextended itself on a historic coastal hotel called the Aurelia, a property with marble terraces, ocean views, and repair costs large enough to make accountants religious. Nathaniel planned to convert it into a private members' resort. He called it the future of refined travel. The board called it a cash drain behind closed doors. The only reason Vale Meridian had not collapsed was a bridge facility arranged through North Quay Capital, a conservative fund that rarely touched glamorous hospitality deals. North Quay's controlling investor was Hartwell Conservancy Trust. Elise learned the connection by accident, though later she wondered if accidents were sometimes the universe losing patience. 3 months before the wedding, Nathaniel left a folder on her dining table while taking a call in the hallway. She had not meant to read it, but the top page displayed a familiar trust code, one she had seen since childhood on quarterly reports. HCT 12. Her stomach tightened. She opened nothing. She simply looked at the visible line. Conditional review pending final covenant certification. When Nathaniel returned, he swept the folder into his briefcase too quickly. Work drama, he said. The Aurelia? He paused. You remember the name. You talk about it often. It is under control. He kissed her forehead and changed the subject to cake flavors. The next morning, Elise called the family office. Her cousin Graham, who ran Hartwell's investment committee, answered on the third ring. He had the dry voice of a man who trusted spreadsheets more than charm. Please tell me you are calling about wedding flowers, he said. Vale Meridian's North Quay facility. Are we exposed? Silence. Elise. Are we? Indirectly. How indirectly? Enough that I now dislike this phone call. Elise closed her eyes. Send me the file. You are marrying the chief executive. Which is why I need the file, Graham exhaled. We have concerns. Define concerns. Revenue projections inflated by adjusted membership deposits. Vendor payments delayed. Related party management fees. A personal residence renovation that appears to be allocated through a hospitality subsidiary. Elise gripped the edge of her desk. Whose residence? Patricia Vale's townhouse. The room seemed to go still. Patricia's new solarium, Patricia's imported tiles, Patricia's custom elevator because stairs were undignified. Elise had heard about those renovations at dinner, always framed as Nathaniel's devotion. How much? Elise asked. Enough to make $6,000 a month look like table manners. Elise laughed once without humor. Graham's voice softened. Do you want us to pull the facility? Not yet. That is a surprising answer. I need to know whether Nathaniel is desperate or dishonest. Those are often neighbors, I know. For the next 3 months, Elise did something she had learned from art restoration. She did not scrape aggressively. She tested solvents. She mapped damage. She documented every layer before touching the surface. She reviewed public filings. She photographed documents Nathaniel left open after pretending not to care about paperwork. She saved Patricia's messages demanding the post-wedding allowance. She forwarded vendor complaints to Graham. She asked innocent questions at dinner and watched who looked away. Nathaniel grew more affectionate as the wedding approached. He sent flowers. He praised her calm. He told friends she was low maintenance. which was his favorite compliment because it meant a person required little from him. Patricia grew bolder. She asked for access to the guest list, then the seating chart, then the wedding gifts registry, then Elise's apartment lease. A wife should not keep separate nests, Patricia said. Elise smiled. Birds disagree. Patricia did not laugh. 1 week before the wedding, Nathaniel brought a document to Elise's apartment. A simple postnuptial framework, he said. We are not married yet. It takes effect afterward. She looked at the first page. It was not simple. It gave Nathaniel authority over marital investment decisions, placed Patricia as family household administrator, and required Elise to make reasonable monthly contributions to support Vale family obligations. There it was again, $6,000. My lawyer will review it, Elise said. Nathaniel's smile thinned. I thought we trusted each other. Then you should trust me to get legal advice. You are making this adversarial. The document did that before I touched it. He paced to the window, frustration tightening his shoulders. Mother warned me you would become difficult after the ring. Elise felt the sentence land, but she kept her voice even. And what did you warn her? He turned. What? When she demanded my money, my house, and an allowance, what did you warn her? His silence answered. Elise folded the document and handed it back. No, she said. Nathaniel stared at her as if no were a language he had. Wedding should have been canceled that night. Elise knew that. Even as Nathaniel apologized the next morning with orchids, a tired voice, and the kind of remorse that looked expensive but expired quickly, she knew. I panicked, he said. The company is under pressure. Mother is anxious. I handled it badly. You tried to put your mother in charge of my life. I withdrew the document. Because I refused to sign. Because I love you. Elise looked at him across her apartment. Rain streaked the windows behind him. He had come without an umbrella, which she suspected was intentional. Wet hair softened him. Damp shoulders made him look human. Do you? She asked. Pain crossed his face, and for one dangerous moment, she almost believed it had arrived from a real place. Yes, he said. More than I know how to manage. That was the sentence that kept the wedding alive. Not because it healed the damage, but because Elise wanted one last chance to know whether he would choose truth when performance was no longer useful. So she set terms. Separate finances. No postnuptial agreement without independent counsel. No monthly allowance to Patricia. No family property transfers. Full disclosure of any company matters that could affect their marriage. Nathaniel agreed to all of it while holding both her hands. Anything, he said. I choose you. His eyes shone. Elise watched carefully. There was emotion there. She did not doubt that. But emotion, she had learned, was not character. A man could feel deeply and still act selfishly. He could cry over losing access while never grieving the harm that made access impossible. She told Graham to prepare final lender review but not act without her signal. You are still marrying him? Graham asked. I am walking to the altar, Elise said. I have not decided what happens after. That is not how weddings usually work. This one is unusual. Your grandmother would have loaded a shotgun. Grandmother would have loaded a balance sheet. Graham snorted. True. The day before the wedding, Elise visited the Aurelia alone. The hotel sat above a gray-blue stretch of coast, all white stone and arched windows. Beautiful in the way old buildings are beautiful when they have survived storms and rich people's renovations. Construction crews moved through the lobby. Half the chandeliers were wrapped in plastic. A fountain stood dry in the courtyard. Nathaniel had described it as his masterpiece. Elise saw something else. A property starved for cash while money bled into Patricia's townhouse. Workers waiting on delayed payments. Local staff uncertain whether their jobs would exist after the grand reopening. A dream polished for investors and hollowed out behind the walls. An older man in a paint-stained jacket found her near the ballroom. You lost? He asked. Probably, Elise said. He smiled. That makes two of us. His name was Owen Price, a restoration carpenter who had worked on historic buildings for 40 years. He recognized Elise from a museum project in Boston and relaxed when she introduced herself. You marrying Mr. Vale tomorrow? He asked. I am scheduled to. Owen studied her tone and wisely did not congratulate her. Instead, he pointed toward the ceiling. See that plaster work? Original. They wanted to rip half of it down to add hidden speakers. I told them dead craftsmen would rise from the ground and bite them. Elise looked up. The ceiling medallion was cracked but exquisite. Did they listen? Not at first. Then some woman from the lender's side sent a preservation condition, saved the whole room. Elise kept her face still. That condition had come from her. Owen led her through the ground floor, speaking with the weary affection of someone who loved buildings more than owners. Near the service corridor, they passed a group of workers arguing with a site manager. 2 invoices unpaid, Owen muttered. Maybe 3. For how long? Long enough that people stopped saying soon. Elise thanked him and left with salt wind in her hair and anger settling into something colder than hurt. That night, Patricia hosted the rehearsal dinner at her townhouse. The solarium glittered. New imported tiles, new glass roof, new brass railings around the little indoor orange trees she called European. Elise looked at the floor and saw vendor invoices. Patricia kissed the air beside her cheek. Tomorrow, you become a veil. Do we? Patricia's smile sharpened. Legally. Nathaniel appeared, sliding an arm around Elise's waist. Mother, be kind. I am always kind to those who understand gratitude. Elise felt his fingers tighten at her hip. Not protection this time. Control. During dinner, Patricia gave a toast about sacrifice. A mother gives everything, she said, looking at Nathaniel with shining eyes. A wife receives the finished man and should honor the woman who shaped him. Guests clapped. Elise lifted her water glass and watched Nathaniel watch his mother. There was love there. Real love. There was also obedience, resentment, dependence, and the lifelong training of a son taught that guilt was a leash decorated as devotion. Elise almost pitied him. Almost. Elise woke before the alarm. The bridal suite overlooked the city park, where early joggers moved beneath pale light, and a gardener watered beds of tulips that would not remember who married whom above them. Her dress hung from the wardrobe door, ivory satin and hand-stitched lace, quiet rather than grand. The veil had belonged to her grandmother Nora, who had worn it for exactly 20 minutes before taking it off to negotiate a warehouse lease by telephone. Elise touched the lace with 2 fingers. You look like someone about to rob a bank, her maid of honor, Claire, said from the sofa. Claire Bennett had been Elise's friend since college. She was a trauma surgeon with blunt bangs, sharper instincts, and no patience for charming men who made women feel unreasonable for having boundaries. Too dramatic? Elise asked. For a wedding? Possibly. For this wedding? Refreshing. Elise smiled. Claire stood and handed her coffee. Last chance. To run? To leave by elevator, stairs, window, laundry cart, or fake medical emergency. I can make one convincing. I know. You do not owe him a final test. Elise looked out at the park. I owe myself the truth without imagination filling the gaps. Claire sighed. That sentence sounds calm, which means it is probably dangerous. I have documents ready. That is not the same as having your heart ready. Elise turned. My heart has been catching up for months. Claire's expression softened. Then I am beside you. At 11, hair and makeup began. At noon, flowers arrived. At 1, Patricia sent a message through the wedding planner asking whether Elise had reconsidered the family contribution matter because public unity mattered. Elise showed the message to Claire. Claire read it, stared, then said, I withdraw my medical emergency offer. I now support arson emotionally, though not legally. Elise laughed, and the sound surprised the makeup artist so much she almost dropped a brush. At 2:30, Graham arrived in a dark suit with a slim folder. He kissed Elise's cheek and looked at her in the mirror. The final covenant certification is due Monday. If he behaves today, we can still restructure without public blood. And if he does not? North Quay freezes the facility. Hartwell notifies the board. Outside counsel delivers the misuse report. The court officer serves preliminary preservation notices for related party asset transfers. Claire crossed her arms. You brought a court officer to a wedding? Graham looked mildly offended. Discreetly. Elise closed her eyes for a moment. Graham's voice lowered. You can stop this quietly before the ceremony. No, she said. If I stop quietly, Patricia becomes a rumor. Nathaniel becomes misunderstood. I become the woman who overreacted before a wedding. They will rewrite it by dinner. Public truth has a cost. So does private erasure. At 4, Elise walked down the aisle. The church was filled with white hydrangeas and people dressed to be seen. Nathaniel stood at the altar, handsome enough to make strangers forgive him in advance. His eyes softened when he saw her, and for a heartbeat, grief opened inside Elise, because some part of him did love the image of her coming toward him. He loved the quiet woman in ivory. He loved the calm beside his ambition. He loved the idea of being admired by someone he could underestimate. The ceremony passed like a painting being viewed through glass. Vows, rings, applause, the kiss. Patricia weeping into lace. Nathaniel squeezing Elise's hand too hard. At the reception, guests moved into the Grand Meridian Ballroom, the most expensive room in Nathaniel's flagship city hotel. It had gilded mirrors, marble columns, and a ceiling painted with clouds that made the chandeliers look like captured stars. Elise had suggested a smaller venue. Nathaniel insisted the room represented legacy. He did not mention that the hotel belonged to a subsidiary currently in covenant review. Dinner began. Speeches followed. Claire's toast was warm and careful. Graham's was brief enough to be legally prudent. Nathaniel's best man told stories about deals, boats, and how Nathaniel always got what he wanted. Then Patricia stood. She did not have a microphone yet, but the room quieted anyway. Some women can command attention by making everyone afraid of missing the insult. Tonight, Patricia said, I do not lose a son. I gain a daughter who, I hope, understands that entering a family means serving its traditions. Elise felt Claire stiffen beside her. Nathaniel rose quickly, smiling. Mother, let me. He took the microphone from the MC. The gesture looked spontaneous. Elise knew instantly it was not. Patricia sat, satisfied. Nathaniel turned toward the room with his groom's smile, the one polished for cameras and investors. My mother is right, he began. Family is not a word. It is an order of loyalty. Elise's fingers went still around the stem of her glass. There it was. The final test had chosen its own stage. Voice most, when the room agreed to be warmed by it. I have watched my mother sacrifice for me, he said. After my father died, she held our family together. She taught me discipline, taste, duty. Everything I am began with her. Guests nodded. Patricia lowered her eyes in a performance of modesty so practiced it had muscle memory. Elise watched Nathaniel's left hand. He tapped his thumb twice against the microphone handle. A nervous habit. He knew he was crossing the line and had chosen to do it publicly because public pressure was the point. Elise and I spoke privately about how to honor that, he continued. And I am proud to say my wife understands that marriage means joining the Vale family fully. Claire whispered, Oh, no. Nathaniel's smile widened. So tonight, in front of everyone we love, I want to make our first family commitment clear. Mother gets everything she needs to maintain the Vale home and traditions. She will manage the primary residence, advise on family assets, and receive $6,000 monthly from our household. It is the least we can do. The sentence passed through the room like a blade hidden inside ribbon. Some people clapped because they did not understand. Others stared into their plates. A few looked at Elise with pity, which was worse than shock. Patricia dabbed her eyes. My son. Nathaniel turned toward Elise, still speaking to the room. My wife is not a selfish, modern woman. She knows a good marriage begins with respect. There it was. The little cage built out of compliments. Elise stood. Nathaniel saw her move and relaxed, misunderstanding everything. Come here, sweetheart, he said into the microphone. Let everyone see the woman who has made me so proud. Elise walked to him. The ballroom lights caught the beadwork at the edge of her sleeves. Her face remained composed, but inside her something old and obedient took its last breath. She reached for the microphone. Nathaniel held it a fraction too long. Their eyes met. Elise, he murmured, smile fixed. Don't. You started this, she said softly. Then she took it. The sound system squealed. Conversations died. Patricia's hand closed around the edge of the tablecloth. Elise faced the guests. Good evening, she said. The politeness made the room more afraid. Since my husband has decided our private financial life belongs in his wedding toast, I will honor the format. Nathaniel stepped closer. Elise. She lifted one hand without looking at him, and the gesture stopped him more effectively than shouting would have. Nathaniel said I agreed that his mother would receive control over our residence, influence over family assets, and $6,000 monthly. That is false. Patricia rose halfway. This is vulgar. Elise looked at her. Yes, it became vulgar when your son tried to turn humiliation into applause. A ripple moved through the guests. Nathaniel's face reddened. You are upset. Sit down. No, the word landed cleanly. Elise continued. For months, Patricia Vale has demanded that I fund her household. She has presented written lists, private messages, and a proposed post-nuptial structure placing her in control of property she does not own. Patricia's voice sharpened. Lies. Elise nodded toward the screens behind the band. The wedding planner, pale and shaking, looked toward the AV technician. The technician looked at Graham. Graham gave one small nod. The screens changed. Instead of engagement photographs, the room saw Patricia's handwritten marriage order list, enlarged in perfect resolution. Monthly contribution to Patricia's household, $6,000. Gasps broke across the ballroom. Patricia's mouth opened. Elise did not raise her voice. That is her handwriting. Nathaniel lunged toward the technician's booth. Two security men stepped quietly into his path. He stopped, stunned. What is this? Elise turned to him. Documentation. The next image appeared, text messages from Patricia. A wife who benefits from a Vale name must support the woman who created it. Do not make Nathaniel choose between his mother and a girl with no lineage. 6,000 is symbolic. Refusing it would announce hostility. Marissa covered her mouth. Nathaniel's best man stared at the floor. Several older women near Patricia leaned away from her by inches. Patricia's voice broke with fury. You trapped us. No, Elisa said. I kept records. Nathaniel stepped toward her again. Turn this off! Elisa's eyes moved to him. You asked for witnesses. The third slide appeared. The proposed postnuptial framework, clause after clause highlighted in yellow. Patricia Vale as family household administrator. Mandatory monthly household contribution. Spousal financial authority delegated to Nathaniel Vale. Elise heard someone whisper, On the wedding day? She let the room absorb it. Then she said, But that is only the family portion. Nathaniel went very still. Elise looked toward the side doors. Mr. Calder. Letter 7. Julian Calder did not walk like a man arriving at a party. He moved with the steady pace of someone who had spent 30 years entering rooms where powerful people were about to discover paperwork outlived charm. His silver hair was neatly combed, his navy suit old but perfect, and his briefcase looked heavier than the Champagne Towers. Beside him came two auditors from North Quay Capital and a court officer in plain clothes. Behind them, a woman in a navy suit carried a sealed folder against her chest. The room recognized seriousness before it understood content. Nathaniel pointed at Julian. Get out! Julian stopped near the first table and looked at Elise, not Nathaniel. Mrs. Vale, do you wish to proceed? The new name struck the room strangely. Mrs. Vale. Elise had owned it for less than 3 hours, and already it sounded like something she might return unopened. Yes, she said. Nathaniel laughed. It came out thin. Proceed with what? This is my wedding. It is also, Julian said, a venue owned by Vale Meridian Hospitality Group, currently subject to lender covenant review. Guests who had been leaning forward leaned farther. Patricia gripped Nathaniel's arm. Stop speaking to him. Elise lifted the microphone. Nathaniel, for months you told me your company was stable. You told me the Aurelia project was fully funded. You told me your mother's renovations were private family expenses. They are. No, said one of the auditors. The voice came from a young woman with dark hair pulled into a severe knot. She did not look impressed by wealth, weddings, or panic. Julian opened his briefcase and removed a document. Preliminary review indicates that funds connected to Vale Meridian subsidiaries were allocated to Patricia Vale's townhouse renovation, personal security, household staff, and luxury travel, while vendor payments related to the Aurelia remained outstanding. Patricia's face drained of color. Nathaniel recovered enough to sneer. This is confidential corporate information. Confidential from guests, perhaps, Julian said. Not from lenders. Elise watched Nathaniel process the word lenders. Then he looked at her. For the first time that day, fear reached his eyes. What did you do? He asked. I listened, she said. You spoke carelessly around someone you thought could not understand the room. The screens changed again. Vendor complaint summaries, delayed payment schedules, related party expense flags, a flowchart showing money leaving hospitality accounts and arriving at contractors tied to Patricia's solarium, elevator, and interior redesign. The ballroom erupted. That is not proof, Nathaniel snapped. Julian nodded. That is why the sealed preservation orders will require complete records. The court officer stepped forward. Nathaniel stared at the envelope in his hand as if paper had become a weapon. You cannot serve me at my wedding. The officer's expression did not change. I can. Laughter burst from somewhere in the back, quickly smothered. Patricia swayed, and for one moment Elise thought she might faint. Then the older woman's spine stiffened. Patricia did not collapse. Women like her rarely wasted a room by leaving it. She turned toward the guests. This is an attack by a spiteful bride. Elise looked at her calmly. No. This is the result of a mother and son assuming every woman in the room existed to protect their image. Nathaniel took one step toward Elise. Security moved at once. He stopped, furious. You planned this. I prepared for it. You married me to destroy me? Elise felt that one. Not because it was true, but because it revealed how quickly he could convert consequence into victimhood. I walked down the aisle hoping you would choose honesty, she said. You chose a microphone. A hush followed. Claire closed her eyes for half a second, as if that sentence had hurt and healed at once. Julian handed Nathaniel the envelope. Mr. Vale, your board will receive formal notice within the hour. North Quay Capital is freezing further disbursements pending review. Nathaniel's lips parted. Freezing? Yes. The Aurelia cannot pause. Then it should not have been financed with manipulated reporting. Nathaniel looked past him to Elise. Tell them to stop. There it was. Not an apology. Not shock at his own misconduct. An order, spoken to the woman he had publicly tried to bend. Elise held the microphone at her side now. She did not need amplification for the next sentence, but the microphone caught it anyway. No. The word filled the ballroom. Patricia turned on her. You ungrateful little nobody. Elise's expression changed at last. Not into anger. Into clarity. Mrs. Vale, she said, you keep using that word because you never bothered to learn mine. She nodded toward Graham. The screens went dark for one breath, then lit again with a single clean line. Hartwell Conservancy Trust, controlling investor, North Quay Capital Strategic Facility. The murmurs became a roar. Nathaniel stared at the screen, then at Elise, then back at the screen. The color left her ate. Elise had imagined many versions of Nathaniel discovering her family background. In some, he laughed awkwardly and claimed he had always known she was special. In others, he became angry and accused her of deception, as if his ignorance were a contract she had violated. She had not imagined him simply silent. For 10 full seconds, Nathaniel Vale said nothing. The ballroom, however, said everything. Guests whispered the Hartwell name with sudden reverence. Investors at table 9 began checking their phones. A city councilman who had earlier praised Nathaniel's vision leaned toward his wife and muttered something that made her eyebrows rise. Patricia looked at Elise as if a chair had turned into a judge. Graham walked to Elise's side. He did not take the microphone. He did not need it. For clarity, he said, voice carrying with unforced authority, Elise Hartwell is a voting beneficiary and investment committee participant of Hartwell Conservancy Trust. She recused herself from final votes regarding Vale Meridian once the engagement began. She also requested enhanced review after potential conflicts and irregularities appeared. Nathaniel found his voice. You spied on me. Elise looked tired for the first time. You left documents on my table. Your mother sent demands to my phone. Your company delayed vendors whose work I personally inspected. Do not confuse visibility with conspiracy. You should have told me who you were. I did. No, you did not. I told you my name. The sentence cut through the room with quiet elegance. Nathaniel flinched. Patricia recovered enough to laugh bitterly. Old money playing poor. How tasteful. Elise turned to her. Not poor. Private. You deceived my son. Your son proposed before asking who I was beyond what he could use. Patricia's mouth tightened. For once, the room did not rush to protect her dignity. Nathaniel's mind began working again, which was visible in the small movements of his face. Panic became calculation. Calculation became performance. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, though the microphone still caught him. Elise, we can discuss this privately. You had that option. I was foolish. You were strategic. I was under pressure. You were cruel. That word struck him because it was not dramatic. It was accurate. The wedding photographer, trapped near the dessert table, slowly lowered his camera. Some moments were too expensive to capture. Nathaniel reached for Elise's hand. She moved before he touched her. The withdrawal was small, but every person watching understood it. Do not do that, she said. His jaw flexed. You are my wife. Legally, for the moment. Another wave of whispers. Patricia snapped. You cannot annul a marriage because a husband honored his mother. Julian Calder answered before Elise needed to. No, but fraud, coercive financial intent, undisclosed material liabilities, and public misrepresentation before consummation create several avenues. We will discuss them outside this room. Marissa, Nathaniel's sister, stood suddenly. She had been quiet all evening, pale behind her champagne glass. Now her chair scraped back with a sound that made several people turn. Mother knew, Marissa said. Patricia's head whipped toward her. Sit down. Marissa's lips trembled, but she remained standing. She knew about the invoices. She told Nathaniel the company owed her after everything Dad put her through. Marissa? No. Marissa's voice cracked, then strengthened. You made him pay for the house through the company. You said lenders would never look at domestic details. You said Elise was convenient because she was quiet. Nathaniel stared at his sister with betrayal in his face, as if betrayal meant failing to protect his lie. Patricia's eyes blazed. You foolish girl. Marissa laughed once, a broken sound. I have been foolish for years. Elise watched her with unexpected tenderness. Marissa had never been kind enough to become a friend, but she had not been cruel enough to become an enemy. She was a woman raised in the same house as Nathaniel, trained differently but trapped by the same mother's gravity. Nathaniel pointed at Marissa. Do you understand what you are doing? Yes, Marissa said. For once. The room held its breath. Julian turned to the court officer. Please note the voluntary statement. Patricia looked as though she might strike him. Elise raised the microphone again. This reception is over. The wedding planner, who looked like she had aged 5 years in 20 minutes, nearly cried with relief. Elise faced the guests. Dinner has been paid for. Staff will receive full gratuities directly tonight. Anyone who came to celebrate love, thank you. Anyone who came to witness control disguised as tradition, you have seen enough. She turned to Nathaniel. I am leaving. He stepped after her. Elise, wait. She did not. Claire lifted the back of the wedding dress so Elise could walk faster. Graham fell in beside them. Julian and the auditors followed. Behind them, the ballroom exploded into voices. Elise did not look back until she reached the lobby. When she did, she saw Nathaniel at the top of the marble stairs, caught between chasing her and facing the ruin behind him. For the first time all day, he made an honest. Inside the hotel, rain had begun. Not dramatic rain, not the cinematic kind that washes sins into the gutter. Just cold city rain, fine enough to cling to Elise's veil and bead along the satin sleeves of her dress. Claire held the train off the wet pavement. Car is 3 minutes out. No, Elise said. Claire blinked. No? Elise looked across the avenue at the row of taxis, brake lights glowing red through the rain. Her wedding gown felt suddenly too ornate, too heavy with other people's expectations. I want to walk. You are in a couture dress. It has survived worse than weather. Graham came through the revolving doors behind them, phone against his ear. Board notice is delivered. North Quay freeze confirmed. Also, Patricia's publicist is calling this a misunderstanding. Claire snorted. A 400-person misunderstanding. Elise pulled the veil from her hair. The pins resisted, then gave way. Her scalp ached with relief. She folded the veil carefully and handed it to Graham. Keep this dry. He took it as if receiving state evidence. They walked. People stared, of course. A bride in full dress walking through rain with a surgeon, a lawyer, and a family office executive was not a common urban sight. A teenager lifted a phone to record, then lowered it when Elise glanced at her. An older woman under a red umbrella stepped aside and whispered, Good luck, dear, with no context and perfect understanding. Elise almost cried then. Not in the ballroom. Not when Nathaniel humiliated her. Not when Patricia called her nobody, but on a wet sidewalk, because a stranger had offered a blessing without demanding the story. They reached a small bistro 3 blocks away. The owner knew Claire from the hospital and ushered them into a private back room without asking why a bride had arrived without a groom. Elise sat at the table, dress pooling around her chair like spilled moonlight. For the first time since morning, her hands shook. Claire saw and placed both palms over them. There it is. I am fine. No, you are not, and you do not have to be. The performance is over. Elise inhaled, and the breath broke halfway. The sound that came out of her was not a sob exactly. It was smaller, rougher, like something locked had finally found air. Graham looked away with the fierce politeness of family men who love badly but try. Julian stepped out to take a call. Claire stayed. I married him, Elise whispered. You exposed him. I still married him. For 3 hours. I have had longer parking disputes. Elise laughed through tears, then covered her face. Claire squeezed her hands. You wanted the truth. You got it. It was worse than I wanted. Truth usually lacks manners. A waiter brought towels, coffee, and a bowl of soup nobody had ordered. Elise thanked him, and he blushed as if kindness had embarrassed him. Her phone buzzed on the table. Nathaniel. She watched the screen light, darken, light again. Claire reached for it. May I? Elise nodded. Claire declined the call, then turned the phone face down. He will start with apology, Claire said. Then accusation. Then panic. Then a memory designed to make you feel responsible for the good version of him. You sound experienced. Emergency rooms teach patterns. Graham returned to the table. Marissa is asking whether she can give a statement to counsel. Elise wiped her cheeks. Yes, protect her if possible. After tonight? She spoke when it mattered. Graham studied her. You are kinder than this family deserves. I am not doing it for them. The phone buzzed again. This time, Patricia. Elise did not touch it. Voicemail appeared. Then another. Then a message from an unknown number. You have destroyed a mother on her son's wedding day. I hope your grandmother is proud. Elise stared at the words. The mention of Nora turned something inside her from bruised to clean. She picked up the phone and typed one reply. She would be. Then she blocked the number. The city's favorite secret. By morning, it was no longer secret. A guest's shaky video appeared online under the caption, Bride snatches mic after groom promises her money to his mom. The first clip showed only Nathaniel's toast and Elise standing. The second showed Patricia's marriage order list on the ballroom screen. The third, posted by someone near table 12, captured Nathaniel asking Elise what she had done, and Elise answering, I listened. The internet loves a sentence it can sharpen into a blade. By 10, I listened was trending. By noon, so was 6,000 mom. Elise did not watch the clips. Claire watched enough for legal risk, Graham watched enough for investor reaction, and Julian watched with the grim resignation of a man who had always believed microphones were cursed objects. Elise spent Sunday morning in her apartment wearing sweatpants under her wedding robe because the robe was soft and she had paid for it herself. Her dress hung from the bedroom door, drying slowly. The hem was stained from rainwater and city grime. She liked it better that way. At 11, Nathaniel arrived downstairs. The doorman called up. His voice was nervous. Miss Hartwell, Mr. Vale is in the lobby. Tell him I am unavailable. He says he is your husband. Elise closed her eyes. Tell him my attorney is available. 10 minutes later, Julian called. He wants to come up. No. Good. I enjoy simple clients. What is he saying? That the marriage can still be salvaged, that yesterday became emotional, that his mother is unwell, that you blindsided him, and that he never meant to hurt you publicly. Elise looked at the wedding dress. He meant to pressure me publicly. Yes. Is that in your notes? In capital letters, though not with actual capital letters in the legal filing. She smiled faintly. At noon, Marissa called from a borrowed phone. Elise answered. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Finally, Marissa said, I am sorry. Elise sat on the edge of the bed. For what part? All of it. That answer mattered. Marissa's voice shook. Mother is telling everyone you plan to ruin us from the beginning. Nathaniel is saying you tricked him. The board is meeting this afternoon. Reporters are outside the townhouse. Are you safe? I am at a friend's. Stay there. I should have said something months ago. Yes, Elise said. Marissa inhaled sharply. She had expected comfort. Elise did not provide false comfort anymore. But you said something last night, Elise added. That may help. I do not know who I am if I stop protecting them. Elise understood that sentence too well, though her cage had been shorter. Start there, she said, with not knowing. It is more honest than protecting a lie. After the call, Elise walked to the window. Across the street, a few photographers waited near the building entrance. They looked bored, cold, and determined. Her life had become public because Nathaniel had tried to make her obedience public. She thought of the women watching online. Women who had been told family meant surrender. Women whose partners turned private agreements into public pressure. Women who had smiled at dinners while insults were served between courses. Women who had been called difficult for asking, who benefited from their silence. Elise opened her laptop. She wrote a statement, deleted it, wrote another, deleted that too. The third version was short. At my wedding reception, my husband publicly announced financial commitments I had never agreed to. I corrected the record and disclosed documents relevant to ongoing legal on private grief. But I will say this. A family tradition that requires a woman's silence is not tradition. It is control. She sent it to Julian. He responded 2 minutes later. Clean. Annoyingly quotable. Approved. Elise posted it. Then she made tea, sat on the floor 11. Nathaniel did not sleep. He spent the night in his mother's townhouse, moving from rage to negotiation to rage again, while Patricia sat in the solarium that had helped ruin them, wrapped in a cashmere shawl and refusing to admit the room looked guilty. She ambushed us, Patricia said for the 20th time. Nathaniel stood by the glass wall watching reporters gather beyond the gate. You gave her the list. I gave her expectations. You put them in writing. Because modern women pretend not to understand spoken duty. He turned. Mother. Patricia looked up, startled by the warning in his voice. Nathaniel had never spoken to her that way. Not as a child when she corrected his posture with 2 fingers under his chin. Not at 17 when she cried until he canceled a summer trip with friends. Not after his father's funeral when she told him the family would collapse if he ever loved anyone more than her. He had built his life around Patricia's grief. Now that grief had invoices. The board meets in 3 hours, he said. North Quay froze the facility. Vendors will start calling press. If the Aurelia stalls, we breach more than one covenant. Patricia's mouth tightened. Then fix it. How? Call your wife. She blocked me. Go there. She has lawyers. Then charm them. He laughed, ugly and exhausted. Lawyers are not bridesmaids, Mother. Patricia set down her tea with a sharp click. Do not become weak because one woman embarrassed you. Nathaniel stared at her. One woman, he repeated. Yes. That one woman controls the capital keeping this company alive. Patricia's face twitched. You told me she was nobody, he said. She presented herself as nobody. No. She presented herself as Elise. We decided that was not enough. Patricia rose slowly. Do not put this on me. Who else should wear it? Her eyes glittered. I gave you everything. You gave me a debt and called it love. The silence after that was different from their usual silences. It did not wait for apology. It opened a crack in the floor. Patricia's expression shifted from anger to injury so quickly that it would have worked on him yesterday. Your father would be ashamed of you, she whispered. There it was. The oldest weapon. Nathaniel felt it hit the place it had always hit, deep below logic. But something in him was too tired to kneel. Father hid from you in his office, he said. Patricia slapped him. The sound echoed against the glass. Nathaniel's head turned. He touched his cheek, stunned less by pain than by the sudden childishness of the moment. He was 40 years old, chief executive of a company in crisis, groom of a marriage already burning, and his mother had just struck him in a room paid for by questionable transfers. He began to laugh. Patricia stepped back. Stop that. He could not. The laugh bent him forward, not with joy, but with the terrible comedy of clarity arriving too late. Stop it, she snapped. He wiped his eyes. You wanted $6,000 a month from a woman who could freeze $200 million by breakfast. Patricia's lips pressed white. Do you know what the worst part is? He asked. She would have helped if I had told her the truth. Do not romanticize her now. I am not. I am calculating. That word steadied him. Calculation, he understood. He called Malcolm Price, the corporate crisis attorney his father had once used, and Patricia despised because he could not be flattered. Malcolm answered with, This had better be worse than the internet suggests. It is. Good. Then at least everyone is starting from honesty. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Can you save the company? He asked. Maybe. Can you save the marriage? Nathaniel looked at Patricia, who stood rigid beneath the solarium glass. No, he said. It was the first or 12. The Vale Meridian board suspended Nathaniel before Monday lunch. They used words that sounded temporary because corporate language prefers soft shoes. Administrative leave, independent investigation, interim governance committee, strategic review. Everyone understood the translation. Sit down before you fall louder. Nathaniel listened from the end of the conference table while people who had once praised his instincts discussed him as a risk category. Malcolm sat beside him, expression unreadable. Patricia was not allowed in the room, which Nathaniel suspected enraged her more than the suspension itself. The board chair, Helena Cross, spoke last. She was 70, elegant, and immune to male outrage. Her late husband had once tried to remove her from a family foundation board and discovered that she had already read every bylaw he had not. Nathaniel, she said, the company can survive bad judgment. It cannot survive a chief executive who confuses company cash, family obligation, and personal pride. The review is preliminary, he said. Yes, that is why you are suspended rather than removed. The wedding video has distorted everything. Helena's face did not move. The wedding video did not create unpaid vendors. No one came to his defense. After the meeting, Malcolm led Nathaniel into a smaller room. You need to stop speaking publicly, Malcolm said. I have not spoken. Your face has. Nathaniel sank into a chair. Can we challenge the freeze? On what basis? That the lender unfairly noticed the documents you mishandled? Elise had a conflict. Elise recused herself. You did not disclose material issues to your fiancé, your board, or your lenders. Try not to hand opposing counsel better sentences than they already have. Nathaniel rubbed both hands over his face. I need to talk to her. No, Malcolm. You need to communicate through counsel. You humiliated her at a wedding and she responded with documents. I would treat that as a personality profile. Nathaniel almost smiled despite himself. Then the expression collapsed. I loved her, he said. Malcolm looked at him for a long moment. That may be true, it may also be irrelevant. How can it be irrelevant? Because harm does not become harmless when committed by someone with feelings. The sentence irritated Nathaniel because it sounded like something Elise would say. At 3, Julian Calder's office served the annulment petition. Fraudulent inducement, coercive financial pressure, material non-disclosure, intent to obtain control over assets under false pretenses. The petition was precise, not theatrical. That made it worse. At 4, Patricia called Malcolm directly and demanded to be included in strategy. Malcolm put her on speaker without asking Nathaniel. Mrs. Vale, you are a potential witness and a potential subject of the related party expense review. You are not strategy. Patricia hung up. At 5, Marissa sent her statement to counsel. Nathaniel read the copy in Malcolm's office. His sister described Patricia's demands, Nathaniel's knowledge, and family discussions about Elise's perceived lack of leverage. She did not embellish. She did not protect him. One line stopped him. Nathaniel said Elise was too decent to make a scene. He remembered saying it. He had said it in the solarium, while Patricia worried Elise might refuse the allowance. He had laughed and said Elise would never embarrass herself publicly. She had too much dignity. He had mistaken dignity for a leash. At 6, he drafted a personal apology. Malcolm read it and crossed out half. Too much explanation. Explanation is where self-pity hides. Nathaniel tried again. This time, the letter was shorter. Elise, at our wedding, I used a public moment to pressure you into accepting financial obligations you had already refused. I misrepresented your consent. I allowed my mother to treat your silence as something we could spend. I am sorry. I will cooperate through counsel and will not contact you directly unless invited. Nathaniel Malcolm read it twice. Send through Julian. Will she read it? Probably. Will it matter? Not in the way you want. Nathaniel 13. Elise read Nathaniel's apology in Julian's office while rain tapped against the windows. She expected anger. Instead, she felt a weary stillness, like finding a room already emptied by movers. The apology was better than she had feared. It named the harm without begging. That did not make it enough. Claire, sitting beside her with hospital coffee and suspicious eyes, watched Elise fold the letter. How do you feel? Like someone returned a stolen vase after breaking it. Poetic and mildly threatening. Julian leaned back. The letter helps legally. It acknowledges misrepresentation. Good. Emotionally? Elise placed it in the folder. Also good, but not because I forgive him. Because now he has to hear himself say it. The annulment process moved quickly at first, then slowed as expensive processes do when everyone needs to justify their hourly rates. Nathaniel did not contest the core facts. Patricia tried to, then discovered that handwritten demands, text messages, and Marissa's statement formed an inconvenient little army. The press moved on faster than the consequences. For 3 days, Elise was a symbol. Then a celebrity divorce, a mayoral scandal, and a tech founder's yacht incident pulled cameras elsewhere. That suited her. She returned to work restoring a fire-damaged portrait for a small museum in Vermont. The painting showed a woman in a blue dress holding a book. Smoke had darkened her face, and old varnish had yellowed around her hands. Elise spent hours under magnification, lifting damage grain by grain. Restoration punished impatience. She welcomed the discipline. One afternoon, Graham visited the studio with sandwiches. You look peaceful, he said. I am removing soot from an 18th century cheek with a cotton swab. It puts scandal in perspective. He set lunch on a clean side table. North Quay will restructure the Aurelia if the board agrees to independent oversight and vendor repayment. Good. You want the project saved? I want the workers paid. I want the building preserved. I do not need the company burned to prove I was wronged. Graham studied her. That is annoyingly mature. Do not spread it around. He smiled, then sobered. Patricia's townhouse transfers may trigger personal liability. That is not my decision. No, but your testimony will matter. Elise looked through the magnifying lens at the painted woman's face. Beneath soot, color waited. Then I will tell the truth. That evening, she received a letter from Marissa. It was handwritten on thick cream paper that looked like Patricia had chosen it years ago for thank you notes. Marissa's writing slanted nervously. Elise, I keep thinking about the moment you took the microphone. I used to think courage looked loud. Yours looked calm, and that frightened me because it meant I had no excuse. I am sorry for every dinner where I stayed quiet. I am sorry for letting Mother make you the outsider so I could remain the good daughter. I do not expect friendship. I only wanted you to know that your refusal gave me a door. Marissa Elise sat with the letter for a long time. Then she wrote back. Marissa, doors are useful only if we walk through them. Keep walking. Elise. She did not add forgiveness. She did not add affection. She added truth. Chapter 14. Patricia Vale gave her first interview 2 weeks after the wedding. It was a mistake, which meant no one who loved her had been able to stop it. She chose a society columnist who had once described her as the last great hostess of the old school and expected sympathy to arrive with flattering lighting. Instead, the article opened with a photograph of Patricia beneath her glass solarium roof, sitting in the room now associated online with misallocated funds. The headline was merciless. A mother's due, or a company's money? Patricia blamed grief. She blamed changing values. She blamed Elise's secret wealth. She suggested Nathaniel had been vulnerable after his father's death, and that Elise had exploited him by pretending to be modest. A woman who hides money before marriage is not private, Patricia said in the interview. She is strategic. Elise read that line while eating toast over the sink. Claire, on speakerphone, said, Projection has become architecture. Elise laughed. The article did what Patricia had not expected. It revived the story. People who had missed the wedding videos found them. Financial reporters dug into the company review. Former Vale Meridian employees began sharing delayed payment stories anonymously. A contractor posted a photograph of Patricia's solarium mid-renovation beside an unpaid invoice from the Aurelia project. By evening, Patricia's attempt to reclaim dignity had become a second scandal. Nathaniel called Malcolm. Malcolm called Julian. Julian called Elise. Nathaniel wants it known that he did not authorize the interview, Julian said. I believe him. You do? Patricia would never ask permission to center herself. Julian paused. Fair. Does this affect the annulment? It strengthens your position and weakens theirs. Then let it stand. 3 days later, Patricia was removed from 2 charity boards and quietly asked to step back from the Whitcomb Club's gala committee. The phrase quietly asked sounded gentle, but in Patricia's world, it was a public execution with linen napkins. Marissa moved out of the townhouse. That, more than any article, broke Patricia's control. Marissa took a small apartment near the river and a job at a nonprofit arts fund where nobody cared that she was a Vale, except when donors tried to use her family name. She called Elise once to ask for advice about signing a lease independently. Read every clause, Elise said. Ask about fees. Photograph the condition of the apartment before moving in. Marissa laughed softly. I meant emotionally. Elise smiled. Same advice. Nathaniel, meanwhile, began doing what powerful men often do after public collapse. He tried to become small enough to be pitied and useful enough to be restored. He cooperated with the board investigation. He agreed to repay personal expenses pending final review. He stepped down as chief executive permanently, but remained available as a consultant under strict limits. The press called it a fall from grace. Elise disliked that phrase. Grace had not been where he fell from. He fell from permission. One afternoon, she saw him by accident outside Julian's building. He stood under the awning, thinner than before, holding a folder and wearing a suit without his usual bright pocket square. For a second, neither moved. Elise, he said. Nathaniel. He looked past her to make sure no cameras were nearby. That small act of consideration, late but real, did not escape her. I will not keep you, he said. All right. The annulment terms are fair. They are factual. Yes. Rain tapped against the awning edge between them. He looked at her left hand. No ring. Of course no ring. I keep thinking about what you said, he told her, that I chose a microphone. Elise waited. Elise waited. I did, he said. I thought if everyone heard it, you would not contradict me. I know. His face tightened. That is the part one cannot forgive myself for. Self-forgiveness is not my department. A pained smile crossed his mouth. No. I suppose not. He stepped back. Goodbye, Elise. She nodded. Goodbye. He walked away without turning around. For once, so the annulment hearing took place in a courthouse that smelled faintly of floor polish and tired paper. Elise arrived in a charcoal dress, low heels, and no jewelry except her grandmother's watch. Claire came with her, carrying coffee and a look that dared anyone to make the morning more difficult than necessary. Graham waited near the courtroom doors with Julian. Nathaniel arrived alone. That surprised Elise. No Patricia. No entourage. No publicist pretending to be a cousin. He looked at Elise once, nodded, and sat with Malcolm on the opposite bench. The legal proceedings were less dramatic than the wedding, which was probably why they mattered more. Documents were entered. Statements were reviewed. Nathaniel confirmed he would not contest annulment on the agreed grounds. Patricia's demands were referenced without her being granted the satisfaction of performance. The judge, a woman with reading glasses on a chain and very little patience for theatrical wealth, looked over the file. Mr. Vale, she said, you acknowledge that representations made to Ms. Hartwell prior to and during the wedding ceremony were materially false? Nathaniel stood. Yes, Your Honor. You acknowledge that financial obligations were publicly attributed to her consent when no such consent existed? Yes. You acknowledge that undisclosed corporate liabilities and related party transfers would reasonably have affected her decision to enter the marriage? His throat moved. Yes. The judge turned to Elise. Ms. Hartwell, do you affirm your petition? Elise stood. For a moment, the courtroom blurred into the ballroom. Different room, same act. A woman asked to make public record of her own reality. Yes, Your Honor, she said. The judge granted the annulment. No music, no shattered glass, no applause, just a sentence, spoken clearly, that returned Elise's name to her. Outside the courtroom, Nathaniel approached with Malcolm at a respectful distance. May I say one thing? Nathaniel asked. Claire opened her mouth. Elise touched her arm. One thing, Elise said. Nathaniel looked at her. I used to think being loved meant being defended no matter what I did. I am learning that love without truth is just shelter for harm. You deserve truth. Elise studied him. It was a better sentence than she expected. It was also not a key. Yes, she said. I did. He nodded. That was all. After he left, Claire exhaled. That was almost healthy. I disliked it less than expected. Elise laughed, and this time the sound came easily. Graham walked them outside. The courthouse steps were bright with winter sun. Reporters waited across the street, but not many. The story had cooled enough that truth could belong to the people who lived it again. Where to? Graham asked. Elise looked at Claire. Lunch. Excellent, Claire said. Annulment requires fries. Julian, overhearing, said. Legally unsupported but emotionally persuasive. They ate in a crowded diner where nobody cared about Hartwell or Vale. Elise ordered fries, a grilled cheese sandwich, and chocolate cake because the wedding cake had never been cut. Claire raised her milkshake. To clean exits. Graham lifted his coffee. To documentation. Julian lifted water. To clients who listen before signing. Elise raised her glass last. To microphones. Chapter 16. The Aurelia reopened 9 months later without Nathaniel on stage. The hotel had changed, not into the private monument he imagined, but into something steadier. The board accepted Northquay's restructuring terms. Vendors were paid, preservation conditions remained, staff contracts were rewritten with stronger protections. Patricia's preferred private members concept was replaced with a more sustainable public resort model that included community access to the restored ballroom. Elise attended the opening quietly because Owen Price, the restoration carpenter, sent her a note. They saved the ceiling. You should see it under music. She almost declined. Then she realized avoidance was another form of letting the Vales own a room. So she went. The Aurelia's ballroom glowed under restored plasterwork. Musicians played beneath the ceiling medallion Owen had protected. Local staff moved with the alert pride of people whose work had finally been honored instead of hidden behind investor language. Elise wore a dark green dress and Nora's watch. She arrived alone. At the entrance, Helena Cross greeted her with a firm handshake. Miss Hartwell, the project owes you a debt. It owes its workers first. Helena smiled. That answer explains why I like you. Across the room, Owen waved with both hands, entirely ruining the event's elegance in the best way. Elise crossed to him. Look up, he said. She did. The restored ceiling looked almost alive. Cracks had been stabilized but not erased. The old plasterwork kept faint evidence of age because pretending nothing had ever broken would have been dishonest. Beautiful, she said. Better than speakers, Owen replied. During the reception, a young woman in a server's uniform approached Elise near the terrace. I am sorry to bother you, she said. Are you the bride from the video? Elise suppressed a sigh and turned kindly. I was. The woman flushed. I watched it after my boyfriend told everyone at his birthday dinner that I had agreed to quit school and help his business. I had not agreed. I thought if I corrected him, I would look dramatic. Elise's chest tightened. Did you correct him? I did. The young woman's smile was small but fierce. Not with a microphone. With my backpack. I packed it and left. Elise felt something inside her settle. Good, she said. I just wanted to say thank you. You did the leaving. You made it look possible. The woman returned to work before Elise could answer. That was the moment the wedding stopped feeling only like a wound. It became evidence. Not evidence against Nathaniel, though it was that. Evidence that public humiliation could be interrupted. Evidence that a woman could be quiet until the precise second silence became cooperation. Evidence that dignity was not the same as obedience. Later, Elise stepped onto the terrace. The ocean moved below the hotel in dark silver waves. Wind lifted her hair. Music drifted through the open doors behind her. She thought of Nathaniel somewhere else, rebuilding whatever kind of life truth allowed him. She thought of Patricia in a smaller circle. Still dangerous, perhaps, but less believed. She thought of Marissa signing her own lease and calling to say she had bought cheap plates that did not match and loved them fiercely. Then she thought of herself in the ballroom, satin dress heavy, microphone hot in her hand. She no longer wished that moment had never happened. Chapter 17. Elise created the Hartwell Public Record Fund 1 year after the wedding. She did not name it after herself at first. Graham argued that anonymity matched family tradition. Claire argued that anonymity was sometimes just fear wearing tasteful shoes. Julian argued that if people were going to sue, they should at least spell the defendant correctly. In the end, Elise used the name Hartwell because she wanted women to find it easily. The fund provided legal support for people facing coerced financial agreements, public pressure, family exploitation, and asset manipulation in intimate relationships. It was not glamorous. Its website was plain. Its office had good locks, bad coffee, and a conference table that arrived with a scratch down one side. Elise liked the scratch. Makes it honest, she told Claire. The first month brought 12 cases. The second brought 40. By summer, the office needed 2 more attorneys, a financial investigator, and a counselor who specialized in shame. Shame, Elise learned, had patterns. It told women they should have known sooner. It told them documentation was betrayal. It told them public correction was vulgar. It told them leaving too early was impulsive and leaving too late was foolish. It always found a way to make the harmed person responsible for timing. Elise built the fund against that voice. On the wall near reception, she placed a framed sentence: consent cannot be announced on someone else's behalf. One afternoon, Marissa visited the office carrying a cardboard box of donated file folders. I know it is not much, she said. It is useful. I wanted useful. Marissa looked different now, less polished, more alive. Her hair was shorter. Her clothes were simpler. She had the slightly stunned happiness of a woman discovering that an imperfect apartment could feel safer than a perfect house. Mother wants me to visit, Marissa said. Do you want to? Sometimes. Then I remember wanting is not the same as being ready. Elise nodded. That is a good distinction. Marissa looked at the framed sentence on the wall. I wish someone had put that in our house. Would you have read it? Marissa smiled sadly. Probably not. Then read it now. They unpacked folders together. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no sudden sisterhood. Just 2 women who had once sat on opposite sides of a family table, now labeling intake files in the afternoon light. That was enough. Near closing, Julian arrived with a donation check from an anonymous source. Elise looked at the amount and frowned. This is substantial. Yes. Who sent it? Anonymous means I get to enjoy being irritating. Claire, passing through with a stack of forms, looked over his shoulder. Is it from Nathaniel? Julian's silence answered. Elise set the check on the table. Marissa looked uncomfortable. You do not have to take it. Elise studied the signature line, blank except for the foundation transfer code. Nathaniel had not attached a note. He had not asked for acknowledgement. He had not tried to purchase absolution with a public gesture. That mattered. Can we accept it without naming him? Julian nodded. Already structured that way. Then accept it. Claire raised an eyebrow. You sure? The money can pay for women who need lawyers. I do not need to punish them to keep my pride clean. Marissa's eyes filled, but she looked down before tears fell. Elise picked up a marker and wrote on the next box, emergency filings. To the fund once. She did not make an appointment. Of course she did not. She arrived on a Tuesday morning wearing a black coat with a fur collar, dark glasses, and the expression of a woman entering a building she considered beneath her but necessary. The receptionist, trained for worse, asked her name. Patricia Vale. The office went subtly quiet. Elise was in a meeting when Claire texted, The Queen Mother has entered the village. Elise excused herself and walked to reception. Patricia stood near the framed sentence, reading it with obvious distaste. Consent cannot be announced on someone else's behalf. Still fond of slogans, Patricia said. Still fond of entrances, Elise replied. Patricia removed her sunglasses. She looked older, not humbled exactly. Humility would have required more moral imagination than she had developed. But she looked reduced, and reduction had made her sharper rather than softer. I want to speak privately. No, Patricia blinked. No? Anything relevant can go through counsel. Anything personal can be said here or not at all. The receptionist developed sudden fascination with her keyboard. Patricia's mouth tightened. You have turned rudeness into a profession. No. I turned boundaries into office policy. For a moment, Patricia looked as if she might leave. Then she glanced around the office, at the women waiting with folders, the attorneys moving between rooms, the plain chairs, the scratched table visible through the glass wall. This place exists because of me, she said. Elise considered that. Partly. Patricia seemed disappointed not to receive denial. Do you enjoy that? She asked. Making me the villain in your little redemption project? You are not important enough to be the center of it. The words struck with visible force. Patricia had been hated before. She knew how to use hatred. Irrelevance was harder. Nathaniel is not well, Patricia said. That is not my responsibility. He was a good son before you. Elise's voice cooled. He was an obedient son, Those are different things. Patricia's hand tightened on her purse. You think you understand families because you had money protecting you. No, Elise said. I understand money can protect exits. That is why this office exists. Patricia looked again at the waiting women. For 1 second, something uncertain crossed her face. Perhaps she saw need without glamour. Perhaps she recognized that control did not always wear pearls. Perhaps she saw nothing except a room that no longer bent toward her. You humiliated me, Patricia said. Elise did not soften. You tried to purchase me. Silence. The receptionist stopped typing. Patricia put on her sunglasses with a trembling hand. You will never understand what mothers sacrifice. Elise thought of Nora, who had built wealth without making her children kneel before it. She thought of Claire's mother, who sent soup to the office every Friday because help did not need ownership. She thought of women in the waiting room protecting children from men who used fatherhood as leverage. Sacrifice gives, Elise said. Control collects. Patricia left without another word. For the rest of the day, Elise felt unsettled. Not guilty. Not afraid. Just aware that some people never arrived seeking repair. They arrived hoping to be restored to power. That evening, she found a note on her desk from the receptionist. New office rule suggestion: no fur collars before noon. 2 years after the wedding, Elise was invited to speak at a conference on financial abuse and public coercion. She almost refused because conferences tended to turn pain into panels and panels into networking. Then she read the attendee list and saw legal aid attorneys, social workers, judges, and nonprofit directors from states where coerced marital agreements were still treated as private family matters. So she went. The ballroom was smaller than the one where Nathaniel had held the microphone, but the sight of rows of chairs still made her pause at the door. Claire, beside her, noticed. You okay? Yes. That was fast. I am okay in remembering. They can happen together. Claire nodded. That one, I believe. Elise's speech was scheduled after lunch, the hour when audiences become sleepy and speakers become either desperate or wise. She walked to the lectern with no dramatic music, no bridal satin, no hidden auditors at the doors. Just notes. A glass of water. Her own name on the program. People often ask why I took the microphone, she began. The room became very still. The honest answer is that I did not take it because I was brave. I took it because my husband was using it. He had turned a room full of people into pressure. He announced consent I had not given and counted on my dignity to keep me silent. Several people nodded. That is a common tactic. It happens at weddings, family dinners, hospital rooms, lawyer meetings, churches, and bank offices. The setting changes. The structure does not. Someone says, we all agree, before the person most affected has spoken. She looked across the room. My story became visible because the room was expensive and the video was dramatic. But the harm itself was not rare. It was ordinary. That is what should disturb us. She spoke about documentation, independent counsel, public pressure, family systems, hidden liabilities, and the difference between tradition and coercion. She did not name Nathaniel more than necessary. She did not perform pain for credibility. She let the facts carry weight. At the end, a young attorney asked, what would you say to someone who is afraid correcting the record will make them look cruel? Elise rested both hands on the lectern. I would say cruelty takes what is not freely given. Correcting the record returns what was taken. The applause was not thunderous. It was steady, serious, and full of people who would leave with work to do. Afterward, an older judge approached her. Ms. Hartwell, she said, I granted 3 emergency orders last month using language from your fund's materials. Elise felt the room shift gently. Thank you for telling me. No, the judge said. Thank you for making the language plain enough that a frightened person could use it. That night, back in her hotel room, Elise took off her earrings and sat by the window overlooking a city that did not know her history. She thought about the strange path from humiliation to usefulness. It was not clean. Nothing real was. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marissa. Mother asked if I was attending your speech. I said yes. She said I had chosen sides. I said I had chosen myself. Elise smiled. She typed back, good answer. Then, after 20, Nathaniel rebuilt his life without returning to the center of anyone else's. That was the hardest part. He took a position advising distressed hospitality projects for a firm that cared more about diligence than charisma. The title was smaller, The office was smaller. The salary was smaller, though still generous by any ordinary measure. At first, he experienced the reduction as punishment. Later, when he became honest enough, he understood it as scale. Scale reveals structure. Without Patricia's constant orbit, he discovered how many of his decisions had been shaped by avoiding her disappointment. Without a company bending around his image, he discovered how often he had called pressure leadership. Without Elise's quiet competence beside him, he discovered how much silence had been labor. He remained in therapy. At first, because Malcolm suggested it would help the optics. Later, because optics could not explain why he still heard Elise saying, "You chose a microphone," in moments that had nothing to do with weddings. He sent one donation each year to the Hartwell Public Record Fund. Anonymous. No note. No call. No attempt to convert money into access. The first year, he felt noble. The second year, ashamed of feeling noble. The third year, he simply set the transfer and moved on. That, his therapist said, was progress. Patricia never fully forgave him for changing. "You have become dull," she told him one Christmas Eve in the smaller apartment she moved into after selling the townhouse. Nathaniel looked around at the apartment. It was still elegant, still far beyond hardship. But Patricia spoke of it as exile because no one important envied it. "Maybe dull is better than dangerous," he said. She frowned. "That sounds like her." "It sounds like someone who has paid attention." Patricia looked toward the window, where city lights reflected in dark glass. "I wanted you protected." For once, he did not argue immediately. "I know," he said, "but you taught me protection meant possession." Her face hardened. "Therapy has made you unkind." "No. It made me slower to agree." She dismissed him with a small wave, but he saw her hand tremble. On his way home, Nathaniel passed the Grand Meridian Hotel, the place where his wedding had turned into public record. New owners had renamed it the Meridian House. The ballroom lights glowed upstairs. Another reception was underway. Through the windows, he saw people dancing. He stopped across the street. For a moment, he remembered Elise in ivory, walking toward him with all the grace he had planned to use against her. He remembered the microphone leaving his hand. He remembered the instant he understood that quiet did not mean defenseless. He did not hate the memory anymore. He hated who he had been in it. That was different. Elise returned to the original wedding hotel only once more. It happened by accident, or close enough to accident that she did not argue with the universe. A museum donor hosted a restoration benefit in the same building, now under new management and stripped of the veil name. Elise was asked to attend because one of the restored paintings from her first major project was being unveiled. She considered sending regrets. Then she thought of the young server at the Aurelia, who had packed her backpack and left. Rooms should not belong forever to the worst thing that happened inside them. So Elise went. The Grand Meridian ballroom looked different without wedding flowers, without Patricia's table, without Nathaniel at the microphone. The chandeliers still glittered. The marble still reflected soft light. But the room had no power by itself. It was only a room. That realization felt almost funny. Claire came as her guest and immediately inspected the dessert table. "Trauma recovery requires pastry," she said. "You have a narrow but consistent philosophy. And yet, people keep feeding me." During the benefit, the museum director thanked Elise from the stage. She stood briefly, accepted the applause, and sat before it could become uncomfortable. Her restored painting was unveiled to genuine admiration. The woman in the blue dress, once damaged by smoke, now looked out from the canvas with steady eyes. After the presentation, Elise slipped to the side of the room. The place where Nathaniel had stood was near the band platform. She walked there slowly, aware of Claire watching, but not following. No microphone waited. No public trap. No one demanding that she prove grace by swallowing insult. Elise stood on that small square of polished floor and let memory pass through without taking her with it. She saw the old scene, yes. Nathaniel's smile. Patricia's handkerchief. Guests whispering. Her own hand reaching. Then the memory faded, replaced by the present. Music, museum donors, a waiter offering sparkling water, Claire stealing a second tart. Elise laughed softly. The waiter, startled, asked, "Ma'am?" "Nothing," she said, just realizing something is over. She took the sparkling water. At the end of the evening, the museum director asked whether Elise would consider restoring another damaged portrait from the same collection. The canvas is badly marked, he said, but we believe the original work underneath is worth saving. Elise looked once more at the ballroom. Most things worth saving are not untouched, she said. The director smiled politely, not fully understanding. Claire did. On the ride home, Claire said, "You know, for someone who had a catastrophic wedding, you have become annoyingly good at endings." Elise looked out at the passing lights. "I think endings are easier when you stop asking them to apologize for becoming beginnings." Claire groaned. "That is going on a mug at your fund." "Absolutely not. Too late. I know a printer." Elise laughed. The final document connected to the marriage arrived in a plain envelope. It was not from Nathaniel, not from Patricia, not from the court. It came from the storage company holding the wedding gifts. After the reception collapsed, hundreds of gifts had been cataloged, returned, donated, or redirected, according to law and etiquette no one enjoyed discussing. Most guests accepted refunds or quiet returns. A few insisted Elise keep what had been given to her personally. One item remained unresolved because no one could identify the sender. A silver microphone. Not functional. Decorative. Vintage. Heavy enough to serve as a paperweight or a warning. The storage company included a note. No card was found. Please advise disposition. Elise stared at the photograph of the object and began laughing so hard that the office staff came running. Claire, who happened to be there reviewing a training session, leaned over her shoulder. "That is either hilarious or evidence of a haunting. What should I do with it?" Marissa, carrying intake folders nearby, said, "Put it in the conference room." Everyone turned. She flushed but continued. "Not as a trophy, as a reminder that people should speak for themselves." Elise considered that. 2 weeks later, the silver microphone sat on a shelf in the main meeting room of the Hartwell Public Record Fund. Beneath it was a small plaque. "Use your own voice. Do not lend it to those who would use it against you." Clients noticed it. Some asked, some did not. A few touched the plaque before difficult meetings. One woman, after signing her first independent lease, took a photograph beside it and cried into a paper napkin. The microphone became less about Elise with each passing month. That pleased her. On the 3rd anniversary of the wedding, Elise held a small gathering at the office. Not a gala. Never a gala. Just staff, volunteers, former clients who wanted to come, and enough food to make Claire proud. Graham gave a toast with sparkling cider. "To records," he said, "kept, corrected, and reclaimed." Marissa lifted her glass. "To women who stop apologizing for being accurate." Claire raised hers. "To prenups read by lawyers and all microphones inspected for nonsense." Laughter filled the room. Elise stood near the scratched table and looked at the people gathered there. Some knew the whole story. Some knew only pieces. Some had arrived because of legal need and stayed to help someone else. The office was warm, imperfect, alive. She thought of the ballroom again, but it no longer hurt. In memory, Nathaniel still stood with his champagne glass. Patricia still smirked. Guests still waited to see whether Elise would fold herself into a smaller shape. But memory no longer ended there. It continued. Elise stood. Elise walked. Elise took the microphone. And then, most importantly, Elise built something. That night, after the gathering ended, Elise stayed behind to close the office. She washed cups in the little kitchen, wiped crumbs from the table, and turned off the conference room lights one by one. Outside, the city hummed softly. Inside, the silver microphone caught a sliver of streetlight from the window. For a moment, she stood before it. People often told the story as if the microphone had saved her. It had not. The documents helped. The trust helped. The attorney at the door helped. The auditors, the court officer, the screens, the public nature of Nathaniel's arrogance, all of that mattered. But none of it would have mattered if Elise had still believed silence was the price of being loved. That was the part no viral clip could show. It could not show the months of doubt before the wedding. The lists Patricia wrote. The way Nathaniel laughed when Elise set boundaries. The lonely discipline of saving messages, reviewing files, and refusing to let tenderness erase facts. It could not show the old habit of giving people another chance because you wanted your own hope to be reasonable. The clip showed the moment she took the mic. It did not show the moment she stopped asking cruelty to become love if she explained herself beautifully enough. Elise turned off the final lamp. Her reflection appeared faintly in the dark window. She looked older than the bride in the video. Not less beautiful, more inhabited. Her phone buzzed. A message from Claire. Tell me you are not alone in the office, creating emotional symbolism with the haunted microphone. Elise smiled and typed back, I am absolutely not doing that. Claire responded, Liar. Lock up and come home. Elise took her coat from the chair. Before leaving, she looked once more around the office. The scratched table, the wall sentence, the file boxes, the old microphone, the door with 3 locks. None of it looked like revenge. It looked like infrastructure. That, Elise thought, was the part Nathaniel and Patricia had never understood. Power was not always a chandeliered room, a family name, or a man with a microphone. Sometimes power was a locked file cabinet, a direct sentence, an attorney who answered the phone, a friend who sat beside you, a woman who kept the receipt. Sometimes power was simply refusing to let someone else narrate your consent. She stepped into the after 24 years later, Elise would be asked whether she regretted marrying Nathaniel at all. The question came from a young journalist who looked nervous about asking it. They were sitting in a quiet cafe after a panel, and the recorder between them blinked red beside 2 untouched cappuccinos. Elise took her time answering. Regret is not one thing, she said. The journalist leaned forward. I regret the pain, Elise continued. I regret the private warnings I explained away. I regret that I walked down an aisle hoping a man would become honest because the room was sacred. Rooms do not make people honest. Choices do. But do you regret taking the microphone? Elise smiled. No. Why not? Because he was using my silence as evidence. I corrected the record. The journalist looked down at her notes. People online called it revenge. People online enjoy simple labels. What was it to you? Elise looked through the cafe window. A couple outside argued near the curb. The woman spoke with quick hands. The man listened, then nodded. Whatever had passed between them, it ended with both walking in the same direction, not one dragging the other into agreement. Elise hoped they would be kind to each other. It was an exit, she said. From the marriage? From the version of myself who thought being fair meant allowing unfairness to continue. The journalist stopped writing for a moment. Elise took a sip of her cappuccino, now lukewarm. That version of me was not foolish. She was trying to love well. I do not hate her, but I do not let her make decisions anymore. The article, when published, did not use the most dramatic headline available. It was called The Woman Who Corrected the Record. Elise preferred that. On the same day the article appeared, a package arrived at the fund. Inside was a small, framed embroidery made by a former client. It showed a hand holding a microphone, stitched in blue thread, with words beneath it, I can speak for me. Elise hung it near the entrance. That evening, she walked home instead of taking a cab. The sky was clear, the air cold enough to sharpen each breath. She passed a wedding boutique where a mannequin stood in a gown behind glass. For a second, the ivory dress caught her eye. She stopped. The reflection in the window placed her face over the mannequin's veil. Once, that image might have hurt. Now she saw only fabric. Beautiful fabric, yes, but fabric all the same. A dress could not promise tenderness. A ring could not guarantee respect. A room full of witnesses could not make consent real if fear was doing the signing. Elise continued walking. At the corner, her phone rang. Claire. Dinner? Claire asked. You only call with one-word invitations now? Efficiency is intimacy. That is not a recognized theory. It will be after I write my book. Elise laughed. Dinner sounds good. Excellent. Also, I ordered the mug. What mug? Endings becoming beginnings. Claire. Too late. It has tasteful typography. Elise looked up at the evening sky and laughed again, free and unguarded. The wedding video never disappeared. Nothing does anymore. Every few months, someone reposted it with a new caption, a new edit, a new dramatic soundtrack Elise hated. Sometimes strangers recognized her in airports or museums. Some approached kindly. Some asked invasive questions disguised as admiration. One man at a fundraiser told her she had destroyed that poor groom and seemed surprised when Claire, standing nearby, asked whether he often confused consequences with violence. Elise learned to live with the echo. Not because she enjoyed it, because she understood that a public record, once corrected, did not belong entirely to the person who corrected it. On quiet nights, she sometimes watched the original unedited video kept in Julian's secure archive. Not often. Only when memory began softening the wrong edges. In the video, Nathaniel's smile was worse than she remembered. Patricia's smirk was clearer. Elise's own face looked very still. At first, she had judged that stillness. Why had she not looked angrier? Why had she not interrupted sooner? Why had she walked toward him so slowly? Now she saw something different. She saw a woman measuring the room before moving. She saw control. She saw grief held carefully until it could be set down somewhere safer. One winter evening, after a long day at the fund, Elise watched the clip from beginning to end. When it finished, she closed the laptop and sat in the dark. No tears came. She did not need them to prove anything. Before bed, she opened the drawer where she kept certain documents. The annulment order, Marissa's first letter, Nora's watch box, a copy of Patricia's marriage order list, preserved not because Elise enjoyed the insult, but because forgetting sometimes invited repetition. She placed the list beside the annulment order and thought about how strange paper was. It could trap or free. It could lie or testify. It depended who wrote it, who read it, and who was allowed to refuse. Then she closed the drawer. Outside, the city moved through its ordinary night. Somewhere, a wedding toast was beginning. Somewhere, a woman was laughing at a family joke that did not feel funny. Somewhere, a mother was calling control tradition. Somewhere, a man was saying, "Everyone agrees," while hoping no one asked the person who mattered most. Elise hoped that person spoke. Softly or loudly. With a lawyer or a friend. With a text message, a signature refused, a door closed, a bag packed, a microphone taken from the wrong hand. The method mattered less than the truth. No one else gets to announce your yes. No one else gets to spend your silence. No one else gets to turn your dignity into their permission slip. Elise turned off the lamp. The room went dark, but not empty. It held the life she had chosen after the spectacle ended. Work that mattered. Friends who told the truth. Family repaired by honesty rather than image. Mornings without dread. Evenings without performance. A name that belonged fully to her. That was the real ending. Not the moment she snatched the microphone. The moment she no longer stories about betrayal, hidden strength, and the moment a woman finally takes back her own voice.